So we've got obviously Shane. I'll introduce him in a minute. My name's Helen Forsey. I'm Catchment Advisor, and I've been helping Shane with the Poplar pole distribution for this year. We have got a bit of a presentation on poplar poles, why, and things to consider: right place, right tree, right place. How to plant for best results, and then Shane will take you through examples with pictures that we were kindly supplied by lots of people that have been affected by the flood. So thanks for sending in those pictures. The topic will be willows and poplars, so no other questions outside of that. And any questions that we can't answer, we'll take notes of and have that available for another time. Yeah, that's about it. Shane you're obviously learning this system. Shane will need to unmute you to be able for you to ask anything, but we will see how we go. Take it away, Shane.
Cool, thank you. So hello, I'm Shane Gilligan I am Rivers Coastal Engineering Officer for TDC, so my main role is rivers, but I also oversee our Poplar and Willow nursery and the distribution of material from that. So obviously we provide material for hillside, country erosion, gully erosion, and stream and riverbank, and that's kind of where I came into this, was because of my involvement in rivers. It made sense to put my sort of efforts into the nursery as well. So right, I'll start talking about Poplar and Willow. So we just a bit of an agenda. So Poplar and Willow, why do we use it? Further considerations. Right tree, right place, how to plant for best results, setbacks and room for river, and then I've got a couple of examples at the end of photos where we can talk through, I guess, my thinking of where you would be looking to position trees for the best effect. So why do we use Poplar and Willow? Why is it an option for us? So a couple of main sort of areas, so hillside and gullies. So erodible hillsides and gullies can be stabilised and sustained as farmland by planting poplar and willow. Extensive root systems of these trees bind and hold the soil in place. Rivers and streams, it's very much a right tree, right place when it comes to this sort of application, and it depends on the size of a river and also the proximity of planting to the river. But they can be, it's one of our main tools in our management of rivers and streams is getting trees in the right places to bind the banks. Some of the, so flood debris filter, we sort of all know the benefit of that. Sometimes trees maybe catch all sorts of stuff we don't want them to do, but in events like this, they certainly stop stuff going further than what we might like it. And just some other added bonuses really, which is shade for stock and fodder for stock. So these, in my mind, are pretty important. I say that from my life sentence block that I'm involved with. There are times when you know, you need that shade, and also it's amazing to watch a cow run from one corner to the other when you lay out a whole lot of branches of willow and poplar. They like it. So other uses, it's not the best firewood in the world, but it'll burn. And poplar wood is excellent for timber, for building yards, sheds, and a range of other applications. This here, I just wanted to put this is actually my property, but the tree that you see in the middle there with all the flood debris around it, that is a willow maxidana. So that is one of the main willow trees that we use in our rivers for bank stabilisation. Now, prior to that event, the river was actually cutting in right hard underneath that maxidana, and through the two events, my wife would be sitting there watching the poor lone tree thinking, when is that thing going to topple over? It would sway around, but it did not move. And then after the event, we came down, and as you can see, there is just all sorts of crap piled up around it, and that tree stood firm. They are, like I said, one of the main trees that's been brought through and bred through New Zealand for this type of thing. And there's certainly some good examples out there of where they work really well. Right tree, right place. So we've got lots of different cultivars have different condition preferences, and trees are like most things, as we know. They've got a preference about where they want to live and grow. Some simply won't survive in certain environments, or they just won't survive. And on the other side of it, there's also trees that probably will thrive in certain locations, but they're not ideal, they're not appropriate. They become a pest or they topple over. An example of this is the likes of crack willow in our smaller streams, smaller rivers, where because of their form, they do fall over. They are a lot more effective in our larger rivers, but it's where we are trying to create and utilise trees that don't have some of those undesirable traits. Now, we also can't we can't always perfectly match what poplar or willow is going to be the right tree in the right place. We're a little bit behind compared to some of the other regions around the country, whereby they have a lot more in-depth knowledge through working with a lot of different landowners, through monitoring, and while we are a long way towards knowing what we think is going to work best for people, we are also on a bit of a journey on how do we get a better record and understand what is going to be the perfect tree for the and the perfect place. So a little bit more on this later, because we're interested in getting feedback from people and being able to monitor these types of things. Right. And so just quickly going back to not always appropriate for certain locations. Yes, a tree, if it's growing right adjacent to an eroding stream bank, and then it topples in, it creates a blockage, it takes the bank away with it, exacerbating the problem even further. So it becomes a bit of a, okay, how do we place these things and where to get a better result? So the poplar and willow varieties, so there's been a number of organisations throughout the years. There's currently the Poplar and Willow Trust, and in previous iterations of that organisation, such as Plant and Food Research, were also quite involved in this in the 70s and 80s, and breeding and cloning trees for specific purposes. So we've got a range of different trees in our nursery. If I'm correct, I think we've got 9 different poplar and about 4 or 5 different tree willow. And all of these, I've only just picked this up in the last probably 2 to 3 years, but and while I'm adding more varieties in, the varieties that we've got in the nursery are a pretty good mix for a whole range of different environments, whether it's sunny, whether it's shady, whether it's cold, whether it's windy. So we're pretty confident we've got a pretty good mix. It's just now about verifying that over the next however many years as people get them in the ground. So how to plant and where to plant. Now we're obviously quite active in this in our river program, and it is a little bit more rudimentary when they're out there doing it with bulldozers and just ripping lines and jamming the poles in. Whereas on a sort of a farm application, it is probably individual landowners, there's some different ways to go about it. So, but what I've just put there in a link to the New Zealand Poplar, Willow and Trust, because they're our sort of partners in this, and they have a lot of good info and guides on this type of thing. And while we could cover a lot of that within this, it's in some respects easier in people in their own time and leisure to sort of go and look at that. But we'll go through a couple of basic guidance stuff for planting. Right, so how to plant for best results, so the depth, watering, stock protection. So the first thing is that when you collect your poles, so in the instance of what people are they're picking up their poles from the nursery, they are already what we call pre-steeped. So they have been cut and they've been immersed in water for about a week. Now that is required to basically get the pole, as it were, to start producing its small roots. And so there's not going to be a lot of success if that is not done prior. So all these trees that come out of the nursery, we've already done that for people. But if you go home and you don't get your tree in the ground within a couple of days, I would recommend just keeping them in water, or even 2 or 3 times a day, just chucking a bit of water over the bottom of the pole where the roots are coming. So we've got to keep them wet so they don't become desiccated. So you protect the bark from damage. So when you're picking them up from the nursery, they're not fragile, but they, particularly if you were tying them down with chains, then you're more likely to damage the bark, and then you're sort of opening it up to drying up. So where we can is to use strops and just generally take care with them to not create any damage. So where to plant, and this is always going to be difficult. I mean, I've written here that the poles are in suitable sites and moist soils or depressions where they'll grow well. Well, in some instances, we're putting whatever event has happened is determined where we're putting them. So sometimes, if you can get the plants in those suitable sites, great. And if not, then in some respects, you may have to cater the site slightly to suit that. What I mean by that is if you're in a bit of a dry location and you're concerned, you may just have to somehow direct water to it, or occasionally water, that type of thing. Plant them to at least 60 to 80 metres deep, or up to a third of the length of the pole. So the pole that you're going to be getting is 3 metres long, and on average they're probably the thickness of, let's just say, someone's arm or wrist, depending on the size of your arm. And they are not the easiest thing to handle and get in the ground. So with in mind that you need to get them in 60 to 80 centimetres, or 600 to 800 mil, you're either going to need to dig a fairly deep hole, or what I would be recommending, especially if people are planting 20 or 30 or 40 at once, whether you look into a small auger, or what I've done in the past is just use a small 1.7 tonne digger, and dig them in that way. I understand it's an additional cost, but you can dig a reasonable amount of holes in a short space of time with a digger. So, but if you're using that application, then whatever material you put back in the ground, you've got to try and get it nice and tight. Almost imagine like you're putting a fence post in the ground and you've got all the material back in. You want to pack that material in and around that post to try and get it to hold better. And part of the reason behind that is if they loosen, the roots may break and the pole, then it could die. And then also if they're not tight, they're just more vulnerable to stop pushing them around. And Gillian, even though you're the only person, Tim, you may have a question, but Gillian, anytime if you want to ask a question, please just put your hand up. It's okay, you're the only person here, so there we go. I now have to figure out how to go into participants.
I think you've allowed me already, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, yep.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. Shane, thank you so much. And I appreciate I'm the only one here, so I feel really valued as a ratepayer. I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I do have a question with putting the poles in the ground.
Okay.
Using a fence post rammer, would that be suitable, like you would if you were digging a fence post in?
As in, do you mean a waratah rammer, or like you're putting a wooden fence post in, and you're talking about the bar thing that you jam.
Oh, no, not at all. I wouldn't be whacking the pole in the ground like that. No, but I'd obviously open up the hole, but then around put the pole in the ground, and then around the pole just ram up the earth with the fence rammer. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, and that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Just being careful not to hit the rammer or scrape the side of the plant. I know it's going to be unavoidable a little bit, but yeah, that would generally be fine.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. That's brilliant.
Right. I will move on to the next slide. Okay, so how to plant best results. So watering, stock protection, I already mentioned that. So protect from stock. Now I know this is a hard one for everyone, and particularly more intensive farming. And this is where the likes of sleeves and guards come into it. Now, we don't provide sleeves and guards as part of this, of giving these trees out. I've yet to confirm, we are going to have some available for giving out over the next couple of weeks, but it'll be fairly limited. So what we may end up doing is some of those may get directed more towards people where there is greater levels of stock. But where you can either get a sleeve, they are about $7 or $8 each, or until there's decent establishment on the tree, then we need to you need to maybe hot wire fence it off. So looking after the trees after planting. So main things there is just checking, once you've got it in the ground and you walk away from it for a couple of weeks or whatever, come back and just check its tightness. Just make sure that it's reasonably firm. And if we head into drought conditions, in most instances, these trees should have had the time to establish and get into a source of moisture before we get into those times. We are getting a little bit late in the season to be doing this, and we would have liked to have managed all this a whole lot earlier. However, flooding circumstances haven't really allowed this. So what I would be suggesting, I think it's still cool enough. We've still got relatively good moist ground conditions, but I would just be keeping an eye on the trees. And if it's something occasionally you just have to go along and put a 5 litre bucket of water over them, reason that that'll tide you over for a week or so. So that type of thing. Look after. So the other thing is, and this is probably more as the tree gets a little bit older, but delimbing it or trimming it to make sure you get the form that you're after. And I'll be able to talk through this a little bit later about why I think this is quite important. Most of these poplar variety that we provide, the way that they've been bred and cloned and whatever genetic engineering they do with the stuff, it has been based on trying to get a better form tree. We've obviously got a whole lot of trees in our rivers where they do a job, but their form leans toward causing us problems later on. So there's been a lot of focus on trying to breed clones that they're less likely to cause issues. They're not going to take away all the issues, but they will lessen it. And one thing we are going to be requesting this year is we want to keep a better record of what people plant and where. Now, this is predominantly, as I mentioned before, with other councils who are just a bit ahead of the game than we are, but we're heading in the right direction. Other councils have staff members that get out on the ground every once in a while and go and check on plants to see how they're going. Now, we're going to start bringing this in more because this is going to improve our knowledge, and this is going to allow us to match better and just in general just have better knowledge about what works and where. So we'll have a form that comes out when people collect, and all it's really going to be is is you making a record of, and it could just be a photo, or you could mark up on the sheet, on a drawing, what you've planted where. Now this is because some of the poplars, I'm getting better at it, but a number of the poplars, once they get a bit older, some of them are a little bit difficult to tell. And what we do want to make sure is that if 20 of your trees die, but 20 of them survive, well, it'd be great to know exactly what ones, because then we're going to be able to start building that long-term record around that sort of right tree, right place thing. Right, next slide. Where to plant? Right, so this is, so there's obviously limitations of poplars and willows, and a bit of an ongoing efforts needed. Now, what I mean by this is they, in certain locations, I mean, like any tree really, that you're always going to have a pro, but there's going to be cons. Now, the problem with some of the limitations is they do get very, very large. And so it's thinking about where you put that tree in relation to the creek. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later and can talk through some of the examples that we've got. I think the other one to be very aware of is that, and this is something that we're working on within council, is that in some instances, if poplar and willow are not already prevalent in your catchment and native vegetation is dominant, then we would probably like to keep it that way. And particularly if that vegetation is doing what it needs to do, then it's actually the ideal option. So maybe for your 100 hectare or 200 hectare farm in the middle of Dovedale where it's dry and it's, okay, that's probably where you would be wanting to use a poplar or a willow. If it's in a well-vegetated native catchment in the back of Golden Bay somewhere, we're probably not keen to be introducing all sorts of new poplar and willow species. So, and then the next thing is the setback. So, and again, I'll be able to touch on this a little bit shortly, a little bit sooner with showing some of the photos. But we've got a tendency at times to plant a little bit too close to the bank. Now, their natural inclination for someone is wanting, the bank is eroding, it's a vertical bank, and oh hell, I do not want that bank to erode anymore. I need to do something about it fairly soon. And so let's plant a tree. Now, that's great. But what we do see a lot of is that tree is put within potentially half a metre or a metre of the river or the stream. And that may work, but particularly like a lot of our streams and rivers everywhere, we don't have enough room. And when that river wants to take the ground, it is going to take the ground. And so what we think is better, and the better examples I've seen, is that we just push everything back a little bit. So this is obviously going to be different for all of our different rivers and streams depending on the size of the river. But a small stream, for example, you might not, you may be able to put some smaller shrubby type stuff, native type stuff reasonably close. But with the bigger trees, I'd probably wanting to go 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 metres back. Now, what that allows is that it gives the tree a chance to establish before the river can try and take it out. More success, even though, like I said, there's that natural inclination. In many situations, we just need to give it a little bit more room. And leading on from that, trees are also problematic. Look, they're great. We're obviously here to sing their praises, and we know they're a very good tool for looking after our catchments, so we're not dealing with the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff in our rivers. We're never quite going to get away from all of those issues, but there are ways that we can lessen that. So what I mean is that as previously described, they're great at binding and holding soils together, but they can also start to fall in, and they will fall in, and poplar and willow trees will get to the size where eventually that will happen. And so what needs to be contemplated there is again, that setback, but also, and what I'll talk about a little bit soon, is maintenance of that tree. Now, in our, I'll move on to the next slide, I think, and I will talk about that. So, right, so council actively uses willow, mainly willow, for stabilising our riverbanks, and if they do establish well, they do a great job at this. We do have a lot of circumstances where hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we have, it's been good protecting the bank, but we've probably tried to hold that line, and what we essentially end up creating is a wall of vegetation on each side, on the left bank and the right bank of a river, and you contain the river and it turns into a vegetative stock bank, should I call it, constraining the river even more. Eventually, mark my words, the river will just, in a big flood, it will take the ground that it wants and it'll rip them out. So that's where we're trying to suggest just easing everything back a little bit. And the other side of it is the wall of water contained within that channel and the wall of vegetation. It builds up power. It builds up power, higher velocity, higher erosion potential, and we're lessening the ability for the river to actually get on its floodplain and actually start to spread out. And when that happens, we'll start to lose some of the power of the water. And if we've got those trees set back, that they're still doing that function of holding the bank together, but they've allowed that water to spread out a bit, and then they actually start to serve as that catching debris function as well. Right. So as I've said here, some of this I've already sort of talked through. Trees set back further from the banks have a better chance of establishing. I won't touch on that much more. That's basically, again, if the river can get to it and take it out, then it's not going to establish. So setting them back. Consider battering back steep vertical banks. I'll show everybody. I'll show a few people some photos soon of examples of that. Now that is basically because that vertical bank, particularly if it's really incised, that is going to keep falling in. It'll undermine at the bottom, and then the next slab will fall in. It'll keep doing it and keep doing it. So putting a tree up on the bank above that, is it only going to be a matter of time before that falls in? If you create a batter slope, then, and you have the tree back along the top of the batter slope, the batter slope has created this almost anchor for the bank above it. There's actually nothing to fall in. It will still chill away at the bottom, but the bank won't continue to fall. And it actually creates more room. So there's some examples that I'll show soon where I think it would be beneficial to batter a bank. And touching on what I said before, a thicker band of trees set back from the channel will allow flood flows to spread better and reduce higher energy constrained flows. Where to plant, some maintenance. So this is a big one for us in our maintained rivers. It's for various reasons, but the trees in our maintained river networks, and any river network for that matter, trees are growing quicker than we can maintain them or deal with them before they become an issue. So it's become a little bit of a focus for us in the river space in the last 2-3 years, where we're trying, despite flooding events and having to react here, there and everywhere, we're trying to move towards being more proactive with our trees and getting on, not allowing them to get to a size where they become that problem. Crack willow is a perfect example of this. It's actually the much maligned tree that it is, and it's not appropriate for a lot of locations. In our bigger rivers, it holds the bank better together than any other tree. But what it does do is it spreads, and then it also, because of its ungainly form, it sends a limb out on a horizontal, and then the tree falls over. So that is not desirable. So while we don't want to run around removing all of these trees that are serving a purpose, what we have started doing in the last couple of years is topping the trees and de-limbing them. So we've got a big scissor-looking setup on an excavator, and it goes around and it takes the tops out, and that actually rejuvenates the tree, and it reduces the ability for the tree to fall in. So, and that leads on to the next thing. So consider de-limbing large unwieldy lateral branches, because that does two things. Is a lateral branch hanging out down into the flow, and there is a number of things we need to consider here from that may be suitable for ecological purposes. But as I mentioned before, that unwieldy large branch is going to snap and fall in and take half the bank with it, or take the other part of the tree with it. What it can also do is, if the tree is actually sticking out horizontally into the flow, it is going to direct the flow in a direction that we may not want it. And I can provide some sort of examples of this. So particularly that stuff lower down by the channel, probably best to keep that clear. And this is the beauty of poplar and willow, is they generally rejuvenate pretty well after topping and coppicing. And that's essentially any poles that we are giving out, that's all they are. They are just something that we've topped from another tree. So they're pretty good at that. Consider replanting new trees before cutting the older ones down. So I'll be able to show my point with this in a moment, but what I'm meaning there is that if you have concerns that your tree is going to become unwieldy and a pain in the bum, maybe rather than letting it get to 20 or 30, 40 years old, once it's got to the age of about 10 to 15, that's what I reckon that Matsudana tree was that I showed you earlier. Around that age, they're really starting to serve their purpose. But I also know that it's going to be another 5 years, and that tree is going to become difficult to deal with. So what I will probably look at doing is planting another Matsudana within 3 or 4 meters of that tree, in anticipation that I take down the tree that is going to get unwieldy, and then I have a replacement off to the side that is already established. So that's it's alternating the age of the trees. Right, now I have a series of photos, and I'll be sort of going back through various points that we've made through the presentation. So this is an example in Redwoods Valley. Now it does show what you can see on the left-hand side bank. There historically was trees there, and some of them have fallen in. You can see the roots there. And just upstream from that, you can see some very large poplars. Now that is an example for me of where they've been. It's probably a little bit difficult to get it right for that piece that has eroded, but where those trees have survived well and served their purpose well, I'm pretty confident that it's because A, they've been set back a decent distance from the stream channel itself. So those roots will be spreading out quite a long way towards that channel. And then you've got a low gradient bank. That low gradient bank is generally way less susceptible to eroding compared to the steeper gradient bank that we see further downstream on the left. So that's an example where, yes, it's probably difficult for all farmers and people in all situations to try and go around and deal with everything it means removing fences. But that bank there, I would suggest if that farmer was prepared to batter that bank to a similar type of thing, I don't believe they would have those erosion issues. But I understand that just can't happen everywhere. Right, the next one that we have here. So actually
We already talked about that, really.
We talked the considerations, yeah. So I'll just quickly talk to that a little bit. So there are some scenarios that we're going to come across where natives are going to be better, and also just the thoughts about if there's a significant natural area, we probably don't want to be pouring willows into it. This next photo is in the Waiti. This is an example of where we have a stream, the river is too choked. So what's actually happened here is that the trees that you see on the right have crept too far into the active channel area, and the main reason that erosion is happening on the left-hand side is because those trees have essentially created deflection. You can actually slightly see it in the sort of right in the, it's going to be hard to explain, but we see this everywhere, and if I could be doing anything there, I would be, these are, I think, bitter willows, so they're not the greatest tree. I would be taking the fronts out of them to creating that space underneath the trees, or I would be pulling some of those trees out. So that's just an example of where, yep, trees doing a job, it's saving one bank, but it's also creating a problem on the other side. Next slide is, it's a bit of a crappy photo, sorry, but this is another one that I thought worked quite well. These are, I believe, Lombardy poplars, so they're not the right tree, but they're an example where you've got a low gradient bank on the right-hand side, and the trees are set back a good, well, probably 5 meters from the channel, and that is pretty stable. You can see a bit of erosion on the left-hand side. That is not helped by the steepness of the bank, but so it's easy to sort that as compared to the other side. But it's mainly focusing on the right-hand side. I like what I see there with regards to the gradient bank and setting them back a little bit. Right, so these are some of the examples we've had come through from people, from the public who want polls from us, and these are some of the applications they want them for. Right, what would I do in this circumstance? Correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, but I'm assuming this is either in Dovedale or in the Moot Tree. I'm not sure.
I think it's the Moot Tree.
I think it's the Moot Tree, right. So the problem that we have in a lot of catchments such as the Moot Tree is, and a lot of these side tributaries coming into our big rivers, is that they are cutting down, and they continue to do that, particularly when they don't have lateral width. So this stream's going to take its lateral width anyway, just by carving off sections of that bank progressively over time. But what it does mean is that with how deep this is, we've just got to be really careful about where you would put a tree, and mainly because is it going to be a success or not. If we were to go and put a tree, let's just say 1 meter or 2 back from the bank, it may work, and maybe the stream will stay reasonably calm for a while and the tree can do its thing. But we also have to face the reality that we have an event like we've just had, and boom, it takes another meter or so out. So I would really be wanting, and this becomes a bit of a logistical problem for farmers with regards to trying to protect the trees, but I would be wanting to set that back a little bit, almost back on the other side of where that farm implement is. So that's just basically gives the tree more time to establish, so the river can't undermine it. I think in these situations here, because of that steep vertical bank, I understand its work, but I would be veering towards getting a bit of a batter on these banks. So similar to some of the previous examples I've shown you, where rather than that steep bank that will keep carving off like an iceberg does, if you have a batter slope on it and the tree higher on the slope, we've created more width for the channel. You actually regain a little bit of farmland because you have a slope which you can vegetate, grass, and then you have the tree further back.
Would you plant a poplar or a willow in that circumstance?
I would probably plant a poplar in that circumstance, yeah. This is pretty similar to what we just looked at. It's very, very similar answer to the last one. Right, this one here. Now, this is where there probably isn't too great of an issue. I would still be, so the blue line is, I guess, what you would say for our bigger rivers is, that's generally where we're trying to hold the river. We don't want it to chew too much more into there. But I can see from the other side, there's quite a bit of width. There's quite a bit of open capacity for the river. So it's, yes, it's an outside bend and it's eroding. But if we didn't want that to erode anymore, I mean, where that pole, I think that's actually a pole there. I think that's fine to get them quite a bit closer in these circumstances. But what you would want to be doing is following it up behind. So making sure that you've got a row, another 2 or 3 deep behind this one. So if that one is to eventually fall in the drink, it's got a couple of behind it. And because this is a pretty low gradient bank, a pole there, even if it gets tapped by the river and gets flood debris around it, it will probably be okay. It's not perched atop a great big bank that's going to fall in. So yes, on some of our bigger rivers, if providing this capacity on the other side, you can probably plant a little bit closer. So this is so these are some examples of where pretty recent stuff where I'm just trying to look at where I think that is. I'm not sure. It looks maybe 88 Valley-ish or Waiti to me. Now, where you can see the outer extent of the gravel, that is where the river actually cut into. So the river repair that's actually been done here, all they've done is just push that gravel, actually I know the one on the right, where all they've done is push that gravel right back in and created a it's a good slope. So that's a low angle slope, which yes, in a great big flood, that's going to start taking out some of that gravel. Now, this is probably where I would also, similar to the last ones that I mentioned, these are, if this is the 88 Valley stream, it's not a massive channel. I think you can probably get away with planting closer in this instance. So I would leave the inside bend. So on the photo on the right-hand side of that channel, I would probably leave that unplanted and allow that to be the area where flood flows go. On the outside bend, on the left-hand side, with our long sloping gravel batter slope, you could plant a long way down that. Maybe your bigger type of varieties further back up the bank, and then maybe some of the smaller shrub varieties down in front of it. But if you wanted to, because that water's got a lot of area to spread, you could in both instances, I think you could plant a lot further down that gravel slope. This one is it's actually, I was about to say similar to the previous. However, this is the Waiti. Now, the river channel, actually, the line of trees in here actually used to hug where you can see the outer extent of the flowing channel. So this was very narrow through here, and the river doing what it did, it ripped everything out. So this landowner is pretty keen to protect all of that, to plant that all out. I think some form of protection needs to happen further down the bank, but because of the narrowness through here, I would be very cautious about filling that whole area in, because you're going to land in the same problem in 10 years or 20 years to what we've just had. We've constrained the river with trees, and then it goes, boom, thank you, I got to get out, and it just rips it all out. So I reckon probably planting from halfway up that bank and then leaving the channel a bit of room down the bottom to migrate round. Right, this one here, this is a slightly different example. It's an outside bend. It's got all sorts of wonderful woody debris that's actually doing a bit of a job and holding it together. Bit in between on this one, whether you just planted right at the top of the bank, but there's probably, because it's an outside bend and it's going to keep chilling away, because it's got all that woody debris already in amongst there and some good silts, there'd probably be no harm in getting some trees in and amongst all of that. But you'd want to be careful with the variety. That's where your shrub type willows would be ideal. A great big poplar, maybe not so much. This is pretty similar to the other gravel one that we looked. Oh no, it's not actually. I wouldn't be this. I'd say prior to this flood event, that gravel was not there, and that was a little bit of pasture. I would just be leaving that as. I would not be planting in amongst that gravel whatsoever. Pretty much where you can see the larger trees on the, just where the terrace starts to come up and where those other trees are, I would be continuing the line along there, and just letting that river rework itself in and amongst that gravel. We only have a few more. Some of these are a little bit tricky. This is too steep. I think, I mean, you can see there's a pine tree there. We know what's eventually going to happen to that pine tree. Willow and poplar are not really appropriate for these types of situations. Whether there's some sort of native or some sort of low-growing shrub, that's probably the best option. What you could do is at the base, so you can, even though that this pile of stuff that's fallen off the hillside, I understand that would need to be moved. But if some of that can actually be retained against the bank and you can plant into that, that's where a bigger tree might not be so bad, because it'll actually help hold the toe of that bank in together. Similar one here. It's a steep scour. A lot of vegetation is going to struggle to come away in that. It's your shrubbier varieties. In all honesty, and I'm never allowed to say this, but I'm looking at all this wonderful mess of bracken and old man's beard and blackberry and crap. And if you can come across some vegetation that does that, but is not that, that's probably one of the better things to have in amongst that. But probably lower down the slope, you could get away with a bigger tree that will then help anchor that, and anything above it won't slip down as much. Okay, these ones here, hillside stability slightly creeps outside what I'm heavily involved in, but it's started doing its thing. You really just bang trees in, as many as you can. You'd probably be looking at my mind trying to, on the second photo, where the actual, it starts to fan out a bit more. Even though the whole thing needs protecting, I'd get the middle of that. I'd get some material growing right in the middle. But to be honest, I'd just cover that wholly. And that on that one on the right hand side there, I'd just fill that in with 15 to 20 trees. Some really good examples that are coming out of this is if you drive between Blenheim and Kaikoura, when you go over what's called the Dashwood, that area is shocking for this type of slip, and there's a lot of good stuff happening over there with getting trees in these locations.
And what sort of spacing would that be?
Probably maybe
8 to 15.
I think 15 is getting too wide. I think 5 is getting too close. But this is where the whole living fence, I mean, living fence is not going to work in this application. But in the end, it doesn't matter what tree we put in, it is only going to grow to whatever space it has. So you could go in there and you could plant 1 per square metre in there, and it'll fill it out, and you just have a whole thing of lots of small poplar. So that's not wrong, but if you wanted to be stingy on trees through there, I would be saying maybe around 10 metres, but you could pull that into 5. Last one here. So obviously we see this in a lot of our separation point granite and our moot tree sort of stuff. It's just a bit of rilling. Now, in many situations, that rilling is a lot deeper than it looks. Jam a pole in there and push as much dirt up as you can and walk away. That's the main. Again, it depends on your location. That may not be where you want a tree. But yep, good examples around the place of rilling where you just fill it in with vegetation and away it goes. That is all the examples that we've got. So it pretty much starts to conclude what we've put forward. Thank you. We've kind of pulled this together in about 2 days' time, and I've waffled away through some of it. Apologies for that, but this is something in this region that is going to, with the events we've had, it's going to grow, and the more that we can help people with it and get it out there is going to be a good thing. So fire away with any questions, my 3 or 4 participants.
I guess for me, the key takeaways is poplars on a lower gradient and then further back from the stream edge.
Yes, but they're okay on your steeper hillsides.
Yeah, so in relation to stream banks and then hillsides not willows. That's really is just poplars.
Yeah. You'd be all right with your willows and your gullies and your wet gullies that'll retain low moisture.
Cool. Did we have someone speaking there? No. Okay.
Can I just ask a question? With the sleeves and the guards for the trees, where do you know where people are selling them currently that would be suitable for the poles?
Yeah, so they don't seem to sell them locally. I've checked at Farmlands, PGG Wrightson's, they don't seem to have any. There's a company called Advanced Landscapes. You probably need to buy them in larger lots. We're going to have a bit of a chat to them to see if we can maybe they can give us a subsidised rate, and let's talk about from sort of with an area where there's something that we can subsidise. We're just not quite there. We don't normally provide them. Now, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, we have actually been given some to give out as part of this. There's not enough to cover everybody. But yeah, sorry, Advanced Landscapes. And to be honest, you could create something if you really wanted to, whether you build something around them or it's a piece of sheep netting fence with a couple of waratahs, that type of thing. But yes, to my knowledge, Advanced Landscapes, and I think they're based in Canterbury.
Great, thank you for that. And I do have another question as well. Thank you for putting me down on the list to get some poles, which is brilliant. I've got a stream bank, and I thought, because you're interested to understand what varieties will work in different areas, I'm happy to run a bit of an experiment where half the bank is one type of variety and half the other, or vice versa, that sort of thing, because I'd be quite interested myself to see what grows well here.
Yeah,
I'm really open
absolutely.
to something like that. If that's, if you want to give me a certain number of variety or whatever, I'm happy to have a play and do a little experiment.
What I will check is because I think for your location, Gillian, if I correct, so you're in the Dove, aren't you?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So myself and Matt visited you maybe last week.
That's right, last Friday.
I think we've got you on the list for predominantly willow only. So what we might be able to, so would you, for that smaller creek, would you be looking at smaller varieties?
Doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well,
Because
what
we'll
we
still
could,
set them
what,
back, and there's plenty of space for them because it's a relatively small creek and it's flat paddocks all around it. So happy to, if you want to do an experiment, basically happy to roll with it.
yeah. Now what have we got? Oh, we have. Are they main? So I'm just checking in on what we've got you down for. But yeah, no, absolutely. I thought in the first instance, because I knew of the river issue, I was probably going to direct mainly Willow in your direction. But what we can do, we do have stragglers, a few poles laying left over, so we could give you a variety of those. And absolutely, if you were happy to see what works, that it's this type of stuff that we're after, yes.
Yeah, great. And we're pretty frosty here, so whatever, even the stragglers, if they don't cope with frost, it just won't work.
Most of them are pretty good. There's one or two varieties which we probably wouldn't recommend, but we do have a number of varieties which are pretty good all rounders.
Fantastic. Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
No
Great.
problem. Hello, Annette. I will have to, let me figure out how to allow you to speak. Participants, attendees.
Done.
We can hear you now.
Or allow you to, you have to unmute yourself, but we've allowed you to unmute yourself.
Hey.
Just wondering, on the main riverbank,
Yeah.
where there is willows that are pulled out, lying down, you know, what can a landowner do there? Like presumably they can cut some bits off it. It's already lying down. Does it need to be sort of buried or?
Right. This comes back to what the tree is. So there's obviously, yes. Let's forget the variety, but yes, a lot of willows, probably not so much poplar, but if there is a fallen willow and you trench it in the bank, and I'll be able to talk about some examples of this in a moment, but if you trench it in the bank, bury it, it will grow. Where we have to be careful and we don't want, obviously grey willow and crack willow, we're technically, well, we're not allowed to propagate it. So we do this in our rivers. We ripped this wound open a couple of years ago because obviously a number of years ago there was a crack willow eradication big mission underway, and that had dire consequences in many places. And with what we've had in rivers in the last couple of years, with the cost of it and the not wanting to use rock, but having a proliferation of crack willow all through our rivers, which actually work extremely well as a buried structure. Yes, if we have a crack willow in our rivers and it falls over, we will bury it, and it will, not on all situations if it's not appropriate, but where we do, it is a very cheap, effective form of protection. Yes. I think as part of this, I would be suggesting no. I guess working on behalf of council, I'm not going to run around. I'm not going to recommend that everybody starts burying because we don't know what trees people are going to be burying. And particularly, I think to check what the tree is and if it's on the pest list. I think if it's on the pest list, avoid it. But yes, physically, it does work. Did that kind of answer that?
Yep.
Cool, I think we're probably done and we're pretty much bang on time. So we'll close it off here. Obviously we've got another one coming in a week and a half, but I am keen to obviously get some of this key information out to those about to plant trees. So I will see about whether we can send this video directly to those that will be planting in a week and a bit. We'll see how we go. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
And yeah, I look forward to doing lots more on this topic.